How do you spot an opportunity for a bright new business? It can come from all sorts of weird and wonderful places. And for Tony Fitzgerald, it came from an old photo, hidden away in the town library in Orange, New South Wales, which Tony chanced upon while researching another project. It was a black and white photo of Walker's Brewery, standing proudly in Mulder Street, Orange, famous in its day for its beer, but long gone. It hadn't produced a drop since the 1920s. For Tony, it was a light bulb moment, and he knew straight away that restoring the iconic brand to its former glory and taking it to the world would be his next big adventure. But there were plenty of challenges and setbacks along the way, including big health scares. Tony Fitzgerald's run successful businesses before and has had experience on his side to reach this point in time, proudly launching Walker's Special Pale Ale more than 6 years after spotting that old photo in Orange Library. He takes Heather Dawson on the Walker's Brewing Company revival journey, starting with why he thought it was such a good idea.
I'm an innovator and an entrepreneur, and I can really spot an opportunity very quickly. And with craft beer on the rise, and we've got close to probably 200 craft breweries now in Australia, and it's got the big breweries concerned. I went, wow, like Orange is a thriving food destination and wine destination. So I just thought, well, what about craft beer? So from that black and white photo, it led me on a very interesting journey over a 6-year period with some amazing discoveries along the way.
Well, that's right, because you had the big idea, but getting it off the ground wasn't quite so easy, was it? So tell us about the treasure hunt in finding original recipes.
Well, it was quite amazing, I have to say. It was like when I discovered the black and white photo, then I contacted the Historical Society and I met Phil Stevenson and other people, and then I met a guy called Ron Gander who had bottles and a beer bung, and we had discussions, and then I had another discussion with a fantastic lady called Shirley Duckworth, who unfortunately is not with us today, but she happened to have her grandfather and great-grandfather work in the brewery for about 40-odd years, and she had some amazing stories to tell and things to share when she was a 16-year-old girl that lived in the administration building there in Mulder Street. And then I suppose the big aha moment, which I call a hairy ah moment, was when I put a story into the Daily Telegraph looking for descendants or people that knew anything about the brewery in the Daily Telegraph. It was 3 months later after that story appeared that I actually went to the cemetery where James Walker's buried at Vaucluse Cemetery in Sydney, and I've filmed everything and I've videoed everything over time, and I videoed on that day going into the cemetery, and at the end I put my hand on the tombstone and looked up at the sky and I said, James, wherever you are up there, give us your blessing. We're going to bring your beer back to life and celebrate the iconic, famous OB beer coming back to life. And then I turned off the video, and you wouldn't believe it, the next morning an email came in from the great-granddaughter saying, we just read your story digitally online, we didn't see it 3 months prior in the paper, and call us and we'll tell you everything about our great-grandfather. And then when I was talking to Sally, she said, well, we happen to have the old beer formulas and brewery books and the labels and the journals and everything else that we nearly threw out way back 90-odd years ago, and we've got them in the garage. And that was what I call a hairy arm moment. That was like a discovery that just sort of solidified everything and sort of cemented that, wow, I've pretty much got everything that I need to do, and now it's time to commercialise it and bring the beer, the iconic, famous OB beer, back to life.
Well, then you needed to work closely with your head brewer to recreate the first beer. Has it been possible to replicate it?
Oh, in a way, I think we're pretty much on the mark. Like, I thought, well, I've got to get the best brewer in Australia. So I went after a guy called Neil Cameron, and when I bought the journals back from the Gold Coast, the family kindly lent them to us for a short period of time. We studied the notes, we studied some beer formulas, we did some research online and found in Trove some stories about the Orange Brewery and the Bathurst Brewery and where they sourced their grains from and their hops from, like Melbourne and Tasmania, and grains from around the area, and some grains and hops from overseas. And then we sort of studied, old British ales, and by the information that we had, we could pretty much sort of create a recipe, not like the actual recipe, the Special Pale Ale back in those days, but pretty much source the grains and the hops that would be very similar to what they used back in those days. And we took a lot of care in the process of making sure that we kept the beer supremacy, because that's what Walker's was famous for back in their days. They were really a brewing company that, in their heyday, they were just as big as Riches and Tui's in their heyday. But the thing is, they took great pride in producing top quality and supreme beer, and they mentioned that in all their ads. And in one of their ads, they had something quite interesting. They said, "You won't see snakes if you drink Walkers." And for some time, I couldn't work out what that meant until some beer historian person said, well, back in the days, they used to put all different types of substances in beer, but with Walkers, you wouldn't get any hallucinogenic type substance in the beer. But they took a lot of pride, and we've tried to do that and replicate that with the special pale ale that we've launched. And yeah, we've hit the money. It's a great drop. It's a great recipe. And yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, Tony, you say it's taken 6 years from that first idea to bringing it onto the market, but then you've had setbacks with your health, which have made things tricky along the way.
Yes, Heather, it's been an interesting journey. Back in 2009 when this all started, 2012 was when I was actually going to bring the beer to market, and we had a deal going on with Woolworths, Dan Murphy's, to stock their 180 stores with 2 styles of beer. But unfortunately, I got cancer back in 2012, and I went through radiation and chemo, and went through a very challenging 2012, and then 2013 was just about being healthy and restoring my health and my well-being. And then 2014, I was pretty much getting it all back together again, and still doing a bit of more research and doing the business plan and getting that right, and the business model, and working out the branding. But then, you wouldn't believe it, last year I got cancer for a second time in February of last year. I went through the whole process of radiation, and then when I came out the other end, I was hoping that everything was going to be okay, but the cancer shifted to my lymph nodes in my neck, and then I had to be operated on in September of last year. So then I waited till February this year to just check in with my health and my well-being, and I felt good, and I thought, right, this is the time to activate it and get the beer to market, and we launched. So it's been a journey, let me tell you.
Well, you now need to grow the business, and you're looking for investors, I gather, rather than the slower road of organic growth. What's your thinking?
We've got a 44-page information memorandum which outlines the financial investments, so we're looking for investors to come on board and to grow a brand and take the Walker's brand to the world. That's what our intention is.
Have there been lessons that you've learnt from your past experiences as an entrepreneur, Tony, that's helped you with this current venture?
Yeah, well, when you start up businesses and go through the process of building a business, there's certain things that will come up, and from past experience you know how to handle that. But being in an industry that I'm not aware of or not mindful of, which is the beverage industry, every day there's a learning curve. And yes, I can draw on some of the things that I learnt some years ago with some of the businesses that I've started. But I think you've just got to be focused. You've got to pay attention to the detail. You've got to be open to advice from a lot of people within the industry, and don't be afraid to reach out and go to the source, as I call it. I often ring up a lot of people and I just say, hey, I just want to ask you a favour. Can you answer some questions? Can you help me out here? Can you guide me? Can you put me in contact with the right person or the right company? So just be mindful that even though you know some things, there are a lot of things that you don't know. And yes, you might experience failure from it, but learn from your failure, because that's your biggest teacher. So, yeah, a lot of things in the past have helped me, but there are a lot of unexpected things that happen every day in this business. It's a pretty challenging business to be involved in. It's very competitive, but you've got to be innovative, be open-minded, and seek support and help wherever you possibly can.
So is that the advice you'd give to others looking to bring a new product to market?
Yeah, absolutely. And just do your due diligence in a lot of areas. Like, you might not get everything right. The thing is try and do your best with what you have and really understand what your unique talents are. For me, I know that my unique talent is an innovator backed up with entrepreneurial skills. Now, when it comes to management and following through and taking care of the business in all facets, that's not my strength, but at some point in time in the next 12 months I will engage a CEO or a general manager or a managing director to take charge of the ship and drive the process in that area. Also get a chief financial officer on board. We have a financial advisor on board at the moment, an ex-Macquarie Bank guy, which definitely helps. But, know what your limits are, know what your talents are, stick within that. focus on that, and then outsource all the things that you're not talented at or not great at, and make sure that you sew up those areas to make sure that you've got a very solid business that can grow and be very, very successful.
Tony Fitzgerald, Walker's Brewing Company.